I never thought I would be writing these words. I never thought I would be telling this story to anyone, let alone strangers on the internet. But as I sit here in my home, the home that I built with my own 2 hands, the home that holds the echoes of a life I once had, I realize that some stories need to be told. Not for sympathy, not for pity, but as a warning. A warning about how quickly the life you know can crumble to ashes, and how love can sometimes be the most dangerous weapon of all. My name is Arthur, and this is the story of how my grandson, a boy who never even got the chance to know his grandmother, risked his life to save a fading memory of her, only to have his own mother try to destroy everything we held dear. It all started on a Tuesday. I remember the rain that day. It was a soft, persistent drizzle that made the world look gray and washed out. The kind of rain that makes you want to stay indoors, wrapped in a blanket with a good book. But I was in the living room, not reading, just staring at the fire. The flames were dancing, casting long shadows on the walls, their warmth a comforting presence against the damp chill seeping in from outside. That fireplace was more than just a source of heat. It was the heart of our home. It was where my late wife, Eleanor, and I would sit for hours, talking about our dreams, our fears, and our plans for our son, Thomas. It was where she held my hand during the tough times, and where we celebrated the small victories. It was the place where I felt her presence the most. And right above that fireplace, in a beautiful silver frame, was the last photograph ever taken of her. It wasn't a staged portrait. It was a candid shot, taken on our front porch on a sunny summer afternoon. Her hair was a little messy, and she was laughing at something I had said. It was a picture that captured her spirit, her joy, her kindness. It was the only picture my grandson, little Leo, had ever seen of her. He was only 13 years old, born 2 years after she passed, and that photograph was his connection to the grandmother he would never meet. He would often stand in front of it, tracing the silver frame with his small fingers, asking me questions about her. What was her favorite food, Grandpa? Did she like to sing? Do you think she would have liked me? I would tell him story after story, and his eyes would light up with a mixture of wonder and sadness. That photograph was a sacred object to him and to me. That evening, the tranquility of the scene was fractured. The front door slammed open, and the sound of complaining filled the air. My daughter-in-law, Claire, and my son, Thomas, were home. Claire was a tall, sharp-featured woman with a voice that could cut glass. She had never really seemed to fit into our home. From the moment she and Thomas got married, I felt a subtle but persistent friction. She didn't like the way we lived. She thought the house was too old-fashioned. She thought my stories were boring. But most of all, she resented Eleanor's memory. It was as if my late wife's ghost was a constant rival for her husband's affection and her place as the matriarch of the family. "This place is so dark," she announced, stomping the mud off her shoes onto the hardwood floor. "And it smells like dust and old people. We need to bring this place into the 21st century, Thomas." She was in one of her moods. I could see the storm brewing in her eyes. Leo was trailing behind them, his shoulders hunched, a book clutched to his chest. He had a quiet, gentle nature that was the complete opposite of his mother's abrasive personality. He gave me a small, sad smile, his eyes saying what he couldn't. I smiled back at him and gave a slight nod, reassuring him that the fire was warm and the house was safe. I knew what was coming. Claire was on one of her crusades. She'd pick a fight with Thomas, belittle the house, complain about everything from the wallpaper to the food. It was a constant source of tension. Thomas just stood there, a tired look on his face. He was a good man, but he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He loved his wife and he loved his father, but he didn't know how to bridge the growing chasm between us. "Claire, please, we just got home. Can we just have a quiet evening?" Thomas pleaded, trying to defuse the situation before it escalated. A quiet evening was never Claire's style. She was a vortex of energy, often destructive, and never satisfied. She walked over to the mantelpiece, her eyes scanning its contents with an expression of disgust. They landed on the silver-framed photograph of Eleanor. I saw her lip curl. My heart began to pound. I knew that look. It was a look of pure contempt. "Thomas, I've told you 1,000 times, she snapped, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at the picture. This has to go. It is so depressing. It's like walking into a museum of someone's death. Every time I walk into this room, I feel like I'm being watched. It's creepy. It's morbid. It's time we moved on. She's been dead for over 10 years. For crying out loud. I'm the woman of this house now, and I want this picture gone. It makes the living room look, well, depressing. Thomas sighed, rubbing his temples. Claire, please. It's the only picture Leo has of his grandmother. Dad doesn't want to take it down, and I don't see the harm in it. The harm? She screeched, her voice rising to a dangerous pitch. The harm is that it's constantly reminding you of your past life. It's like you're still married to a ghost. Thomas, Leo doesn't need a dead grandmother to look up to. He has a living, breathing mother. Me. Why is that so hard for you to understand? She was turning red in the face, her hands clenched into fists. I stayed silent. I had learned that engaging with her when she was like this was pointless. It would only make things worse. I looked over at Leo. He had gone pale. His eyes were wide with fear. He was watching his mother, his hero, with a look of pure terror. He knew what she was capable of. He'd seen these outbursts before. But this time she was different. She wasn't just arguing. She was acting. With a swift, almost theatrical motion, she walked over to the mantelpiece, her heels clicking sharply on the wooden floor. She reached out, her fingers wrapping around the silver frame. Claire, no! Thomas shouted, stepping forward. I was frozen in my chair. I couldn't move. My voice was stuck in my throat. Felt like I was watching a car crash in slow motion. She ignored him completely. She pulled the photograph out of its frame and held it up for all of us to see. Eleanor's laughing face was frozen in time, a stark contrast to the hatred on Claire's face. It's time to let go of the past, Arthur, she said, turning to me with a cruel smile. You need to accept that she's gone and she's not coming back. And I'm not going to live in her shrine anymore. And then, she did the unthinkable. She walked the few steps to the fireplace. The fire was blazing, a hungry dragon in the hearth. Without a second thought, without a flicker of hesitation, she tossed the photograph into the flames. No! I finally managed to scream, but my voice was lost in the crackling of the fire. I watched as the precious, irreplaceable memory of Eleanor began to curl and blacken at the edges. The laughter, the joy, the love. It was all being consumed by the fire in a matter of seconds. I think I stopped breathing. The world seemed to go silent. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, the crackling of the fire. All of it faded away. My heart stopped. My soul was being ripped apart. But before the realization of what had just happened could fully sink in, there was a blur of motion. Leo. He let out a cry, a gut-wrenching, primal wail of grief and anger. No! Nana! He screamed. And then he did the one thing no one expected. He ran. Not away from the fire, but straight towards it. He sprinted from the doorway, his small body moving faster than I thought possible. He lunged past his mother, past his father, and threw himself at the fireplace. Before anyone could stop him, before Thomas could even react, Leo thrust his bare hand into the dancing flames, trying to retrieve the photograph. I heard a sickening hiss and smelled the sharp, acrid odor of burning flesh. Leo! I screamed, finally unfreezing from my chair. I lurched forward, my old bones protesting, my heart pounding in my chest. Thomas was right beside me, his face a mask of horror. Leo let out a blood-curdling scream and pulled his hand back. The photograph was gone, turned to ash. But in his hand, he clutched a tiny, blackened, unburned corner of the picture. A piece of Eleanor's dress. His hand was already blistered and red, a terrible wound that would scar him for life. But he was holding that little scrap of paper like it was the most precious thing in the world. His tears streaming down his face, mixing with the soot on his cheeks. I could see the shock and then a fleeting moment of something else on Claire's face. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't remorse. It was annoyance. She rolled her eyes, letting out a frustrated sigh. Oh, for heaven's sake, Leo. It was just an old picture. Don't be so dramatic, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. The coldness in her voice, the complete lack of empathy for her own son, was the final straw for Thomas. The quiet, long-suffering man I had raised, my son, finally snapped. The years of pent-up frustration, the constant disrespect, the belittling, the way she treated me, the way she treated her own son. It all boiled over. I saw a rage in his eyes that I had never seen before, a primal, protective fury. He didn't say a word. He just turned to his wife, his face contorted with anger, and he slapped her. Hard. He hit her across the face with the back of his hand. She stumbled backward, a look of pure shock and disbelief on her face. Her hand flew to her cheek, her eyes wide. It was the first time he had ever raised a hand to her. For a second, I felt a flash of shame for my son, but it was instantly eclipsed by a surge of protectiveness for Leo and the raw, justified anger at what Claire had done. "Get out of my sight," Thomas growled, his voice low and terrifying. He didn't wait for her response. He scooped Leo up in his arms, careful not to touch his burned hand. "Dad, call the hospital. I'm taking him now," he said, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and adrenaline. He rushed out the door, leaving me standing there in the living room, the scent of burning photograph and burned skin hanging thick in the air. I stared at the fireplace, at the ashes of Eleanor's photograph, and then at the woman who had caused all of this. And that's when Claire turned to me. Her hand was still on her reddened cheek, and her eyes were blazing with a newfound, terrifying fury. All the pretense was gone. The mask of the frustrated wife had slipped, and underneath was something truly venomous. She was looking at me like I was the enemy. Not Thomas, who had slapped her, but me. The old man who had raised him. The old man who loved his grandson. The old man who had a cherished memory of his late wife. "You," she hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "This is all your fault. You and your precious memories. If you had just let me throw that stupid picture away, none of this would have happened. He wouldn't have been so dramatic, and Thomas wouldn't have hit me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was blaming me for her own cruelty. She was blaming me for the fact that her son was now in the hospital with a burnt hand. "It's your fault my son got hurt. It's your fault my husband hit me," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You have always been in the way. You and that dead woman's ghost. Always whispering in his ear, making him weak." I started to back away, my old legs feeling weak. I didn't know what she was capable of. I had seen a glimpse of her true nature, and it scared me. "Claire, just calm down," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to go to the hospital. We need to see how Leo is." "Shut up," she shrieked. "You're not going anywhere. You're going to stay right here and pay for what you've done." Before I could react, she lunged at me. Her grip was surprisingly strong. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, and shoved me backward. I stumbled, my back hitting the wall. She was frantic, her eyes wild. She pushed me down the hallway and towards the guest bedroom at the end of the hall, the room we used for storage, the room with a heavy lock on the outside. "You want to talk about the past so much?" she spat, shoving me inside. "Then you can sit in the past and rot." She slammed the door shut, and I heard the click of the lock. I was trapped. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the street lamp outside. Boxes of old clothes, forgotten furniture, and dusty memories surrounded me. I was a prisoner in my own home. I stood there in the silence, my heart pounding in my chest. My arm throbbed where she had grabbed me. I could hear her muttering to herself on the other side of the door, her heels pacing back and forth. Then, I heard the unmistakable sound of her talking on her phone. Her voice was muffled, but I could hear the words clearly. "Mom, you need to come over here right now. He hit me. Thomas slapped me. Yes, Arthur is locked in the back room. That old fool is going to be a problem. We need to figure this out before he gets back." She was calling her mother. I knew her mother, a woman named Margaret. She was just as sharp and just as greedy as her daughter. The two of them together were a force of pure, unadulterated venom. My mind raced. What were they planning? What were they going to do to me? To Thomas? To Leo? I looked around the room, desperately searching for something, anything, I could use. I had no phone. My pocket watch was in the other room. There was a window, but it was painted shut. I was well and truly stuck. Panic was starting to set in. A cold, creeping feeling that was beginning to strangle me. Then, I remembered. My old phone. I had a dusty, outdated, prepaid phone in the bottom drawer of an old desk in this very room. I used to use it for work calls years ago. I kept it as a backup for emergencies. I didn't even know if it would still turn on. My hands were shaking as I pulled open the drawers of the decrepit desk, rifling through old bills and rusty paperclips. And there it was, buried under a stack of yellowed maps, the phone. With trembling fingers, I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. It had charge. Thank God. The phone was old, but it still held a tiny bit of charge. I didn't have Thomas's cell number memorized. It was saved in my current phone, but I knew the hospital number by heart. I dialed, my heart hammering against my ribs. City General Hospital. A calm, professional voice answered. I tried to keep my voice low, a frantic whisper. Yes, my name is Arthur Miller. My son, Thomas Miller, just brought in his son, Leo. A burn. I need to speak to my son immediately. It's an emergency. It's very important. The operator put me on hold. The seconds felt like hours. I could hear Claire pacing on the other side of the door, her voice a constant, angry drone. Then, I heard another voice, a deep, authoritative and cruel voice. It was Margaret, her mother. They were both here. They were planning. I had to get a message to Thomas. The line clicked. Dad. Thomas's voice was frantic, full of worry. Dad, are you okay? We're at the hospital. Leo is being treated. What's wrong? Is Claire? Is she there? Thomas, listen to me. I whispered urgently, covering the mouthpiece with my hand. Son, your wife is out of control. She locked me in the guest room. She called her mother Margaret. They are both here in the house. They are planning something, Thomas. Something bad. Please, you need to come back. Bring help. They're going to hurt me. They're going to try and take everything. I knew it, he said, his voice hardening. I knew she was going to do something. Stay on the line, Dad. Don't hang up. I'm coming. I'm calling the police right now. The line went silent, but I didn't dare hang up. I held the phone to my ear, praying he would call back. I could hear the muffled voices from outside the door. It sounded like they were arguing. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to hear more. And then we tell the police he attacked me, Claire said, her voice loud and clear. The old man is senile. He's been getting more and more violent. He attacked me and Thomas is trying to cover it up. We have to be ready. When he walks in, we act like we're the victims. Yeah, and the house. Margaret's voice joined in. We need to get that house. Make sure Thomas understands that. He's going to have to choose. The old man and the brat or you. My blood ran cold. They were going to frame me. They were planning on having me arrested for attacking Claire, just to get me out of the way. They wanted the house. They were going to take everything, Thomas, Leo, and me. They wanted to destroy our family to get their hands on my property. I'm not a violent man. I never have been. But in that moment, I felt a rage so pure, so righteous, that it scared me. I was in a cage, a victim in my own home. But I had a sliver of a chance. I had the phone. I had warned Thomas. And he was coming. He was bringing the police. I stayed crouched by the door, my ear pressed against the wood, listening to their conspiratorial whispers. They were rehearsing their lies, their stories. They were going to paint me as a violent, senile old man. They were going to try and destroy my reputation to get what they wanted. Just as they were in the middle of their diabolical planning, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel outside. Margaret's voice stopped mid-sentence. The sound of a car door slamming. Then another. And another. There were multiple vehicles. I heard the distinctive sound of heavy boots on the porch. Then came the banging on the front door. Police! Open up! The voice was loud and authoritative. "I'll get it," Claire said, her voice suddenly sweet and innocent. She was putting on her performance. I heard the front door open. I could hear the muffled voices, Claire's smooth, innocent-sounding lies mixing with the officer's questions. "Officer, thank God you're here. My husband attacked me and my father-in-law, he's not right in the head. He tried to attack me too. I had to lock him in the room for my own safety." I heard footsteps approaching the door. They were coming for me. My heart was pounding so loud, I was sure they could hear it through the door. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. I was blinded by the beam of a flashlight. 2 police officers stood in the doorway, and behind them, I could see Thomas, his face a thundercloud of fury. And behind them, in the hallway, stood Claire and her mother, Margaret, their faces painted with an expression of fake concern. "Are you Arthur Miller?" an officer asked. "Yes, sir," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm the one who called. My daughter-in-law, she locked me in here. She tried to frame me for assault." "It's a lie," Claire screamed from behind the officers. "He's losing his mind. He's violent. He's making all of this up." "Ma'am, please calm down," the officer said, turning to her. He then looked at Thomas, who just nodded grimly. "Dad, are you okay?" Thomas rushed past the officers and grabbed my arm. "Did she hurt you?" "I'm fine, son," I said, holding up the phone. "I'm fine. I have a recording. I have a recording of everything they said." That silenced the room. Claire's face went white. The color drained from Margaret's face. Thomas looked at me in amazement. The lead officer, a gruff man with a kind face, walked over to me. "A recording?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. "I recorded their conversation," I said, handing him the phone. "I recorded them planning to frame me for assault, trying to take my house. They wanted to get rid of me so Claire could take everything. I hadn't been recording the whole time, but I had recorded the last couple of minutes. I had pressed the record button when I heard them planning the framing." The officer took the phone and played the recording. The tinny, distorted voices of Claire and Margaret filled the hallway, detailing their entire evil plan. Claire's face was a mask of horror. Her jaw dropped. She started to stammer, to try to make an excuse, but it was too late. The officer turned to her, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to stern authority. "Claire Miller, Margaret?" he asked. "Margaret Evans," her mother said, her voice trembling. "Claire Miller and Margaret Evans, you are both under arrest for conspiracy to commit a crime, unlawful imprisonment, and child endangerment," the officer said, his voice firm. "The child endangerment charge is related to the incident with the fireplace." I felt a surge of relief wash over me as the officers moved to handcuff them. Claire was crying now, real tears of panic and fear. "You can't do this. It's a misunderstanding. I'm his wife. This is my home. You can't arrest me." But the officer was having none of it. "Ma'am, you can explain everything to the judge. You have the right to remain silent." As they were led away, I saw Margaret's head bowed in shame and Claire's face contorted with hate. They didn't just take them. They took all of Claire's lies, her schemes, her cruelty, and they tore them all to shreds. In a matter of minutes, the people who had been plotting my downfall were being dragged out of my house in handcuffs, their future looking bleak. After the police cars drove away, the house felt eerily silent. The crackling of the fire in the living room was the only sound. Thomas and I stood in the hallway, staring at the empty space. "Dad," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I didn't want to believe. I didn't want to see how bad it had gotten. I failed you. I failed Leo." "No, son," I said, patting his arm. "You didn't fail anyone. You were trying to make it work. You were trying to protect your family. And you did. You came when I needed you. You saved me." We drove to the hospital in a daze. The silence in the car was heavy, but it was a good silence. A silence of relief, a silence of a weight being lifted. In the hospital, we found Leo. His hand was heavily bandaged, and he had a sad, tired look on his face. But when he saw us, he smiled. "Grandpa," he said, his voice weak, "are you okay? Did you get her? Did the police get her?" "Yes, buddy," I said, taking his good hand. "They got her. She can't hurt us anymore." He looked at his bandaged hand, then back at me. "I'm sorry about Nana's picture, Grandpa," he whispered, a tear rolling down his cheek. I tried to save it. The memory of his selfless act, the way he had risked his own flesh for a memory of a woman he'd never met, nearly broke me. This was the true measure of a family. Not blood, but love. Not possession, but sacrifice. "It's okay, Leo," I said, tears welling in my own eyes. "It's just a picture. I have all the memories I need right here in my heart. And I have you." The weeks that followed were a blur. Claire and Margaret went to trial. The recording was the central piece of evidence. Their scheme to frame me, to take the house, was laid bare for the world to see. Their motive was simple greed. The house, which I had built with Eleanor from the ground up, was worth a fortune. They had planned to manipulate Thomas, take control of the property, and then get rid of me. They were both convicted and given prison sentences. The judge was particularly harsh on Claire for the endangerment of her son. As for Thomas and Leo, they stayed with me. The trial and the truth of what Claire had done had shattered their world, but it had also brought them closer together. The divorce was finalized quickly. Thomas was a free man. He wasn't the same man who had been married to Claire. He was lighter, more present, more like the son I remembered. And for me, the house was no longer a home of echoes. It was a home of new life. The sad memories of Eleanor's picture burning didn't hurt as much anymore, because I now had something even more precious than an old photograph. I had my grandson Leo. He had a scar on his hand that he would carry for the rest of his life. A physical reminder of his mother's cruelty and his own bravery. At night, we would sit by the fire, the same fire that had almost destroyed our family. I would tell Leo about his grandmother, the real stories, the memories I kept in my heart. He would listen, his eyes wide, his scarred hand sometimes gently touching the empty space on the mantelpiece where the picture used to be. And then I would look at the space and smile, because I knew Eleanor would have been so proud of him. I learned a lot from all of this. I learned that family isn't always about blood. It's about who stands by you when everything is falling apart. It's about the bonds of love, the sacrifices made, and the willingness to protect one another. I learned that the worst enemies are often the ones hiding in plain sight, and that some people will stop at nothing to satisfy their own greed. But more than anything, I learned that from the ashes, something new and beautiful can rise. Just like the phoenix, our family had been burned, but we had risen from the flames, stronger and more united than ever. Claire had tried to steal my home and destroy my family, but in the end, she ended up with nothing. And I, a tired old man with a house full of memories and a grandson with a scar on his hand, ended up with everything. I had my son back. I had my grandson. And I had my peace. And sometimes that's the greatest revenge of all.